This week on Buffering, it's Dirty Soda Week at Crumble. And Gabe, I just had to kick things off with that. Welcome back. You've been away. I thought I could talk about anything I wanted to since you've been gone, but sadly, I will not be talking anymore about Dirty Soda Week at Crumble, although it is true.
I appreciate the wonderful episode that you and Kristen and Christina did while I was away on vacation. You all did a fantastic job. I listened to it in the car on the way to the airport this week. It was a great episode. So nicely done. Way to hold it down while I was away.
Did you have headphones on, or did you make your Uber driver listen to this too?
I was driving myself. So I was driving myself to the airport on Wednesday morning Wednesday morning and listened to it bright and early. So it was like 5:30 in the morning cruising to the airport. I will say, Zach, I just got back from the airport earlier today, and I am on not a lot of sleep. Didn't sleep great last night. Woke up at like 4 a.m. to go to the airport. And so my brain is a little foggy. I'm a little loopy. It's going to be an interesting episode because I don't know what the heck I'm going to say. I did just drink a big old coffee, or a nice espresso. So I'm jacked up on caffeine and also tired. And who knows what's going to come out of my mouth in this episode. It's going to be a fun one.
I did have a dirty soda last night. Like that was, I didn't just make that up. The sad thing is like, it is Dirty Soda Week this week, but by the time this podcast episode launches and is published, it will have ended. So I do apologize in advance, but for anyone looking for that Crumble bingo card, you can check that one off. Gabe, I do have to thank you for listening to the episode. I didn't actually tell you, we had some technical issues on a previous episode that we will have to redo because that was a good topic.
We will.
But I didn't actually tell Gabe that we had a backup episode ready to go. So I'm glad you listened to that. But I think there's a lot of branding takeaways from last week's episode. And Gabe, we might have to revisit that in a future episode too.
Yeah, I quite liked it. I thought there were some really interesting ones. The whole Costco conversation I thought was very interesting. The other one that I thought was interesting that Christina brought up was the Pilates studios in her town, and the national chains that have come in, and the shopping based off of price or not on price, and the experience that you're getting when you go to one studio versus the other. There were just a lot of really good takeaways from that episode. So it was definitely a good one.
And I don't want to dive too deep into last week's episode, but like the Costco example Gabe was, they're not like a budget retailer. They're not trying to be the lowest cost. I almost said provider, but like again, we often talk about going outside.
Lowest cost hot dog provider.
Yeah, going outside what we know about, now I really want hot dogs, going outside what we know about the industry and seeing what other people do. There are some fantastic examples out there. And like the theory we talk about, the strategy we talk about, Gabe, it's nothing new. Like people are doing this today. And that's what we really focused on last week, as well as some of the implications too. I think at the end, we talk more about how you can't just say you're the local provider. That's just a statement of fact, right? I am the local person who lives at my apartment. I wouldn't market based on that, right? But like, it's a fact. But we'll listen to that episode. This week, Houston, we have another satellite issue episode to talk about today. But Gabe, we have to talk about what's been going on with SpaceX this week. And I think I was just patiently waiting. We had their Q2 earnings call on Tuesday or Wednesday. I forget the day now. It's been a long week. But this is the first time they've reported earnings, and we didn't have to estimate or, really theorize what we think this company's doing. Number one, we'll talk about some of the metrics they announced, but number two, they were very clear, very explicit on what they're trying to do as a business and where they're going next. And what does that mean for broadband service providers across the country? Gabe, transparently, nothing good.
I think I shouldn't say I think. It opens up some significant challenges for sure. And we're going to talk about these things as we go through the episode today, Zach. But there were some very direct quotes in that, in the press releases, as well as, in the commentary on the earnings call. They are coming for it all.
And they explicitly said that. I don't remember the exact quote, Gabe, but I believe it was Elon said something about, we anticipate, being the internet provider for every country we operate, which, quote, is every country we operate in today, which basically every country. They were very clear about what their ambitions are here.
Yeah, 100%. They were very specific about it. They want to be the provider, everywhere. And it's they're also launching new products, which I know we're going to talk about here as well with Starlink Mobile and things like that. But it's very clear what they're planning to do. And it's very clear that they are going to be super aggressive. I know we're not going to talk a ton of financial numbers today, Zach, but we do absolutely have to talk about the ARPU numbers and what that trend has looked like over the last couple of years, because that tells you a huge, it gives you a lot of insight into what their strategy is. And just to, I guess maybe we could just talk about that right now, but the trend there has been really interesting. So their ARPU trend has gone from $91 2 years ago down to $81 last year, down to $66 in this past year, or in this past quarter, I should say. They are buying the business. And they are willing to take a hit on ARPU to gain market share. And what that means is it is absolutely going to put pressure on other providers to maybe not match them from a pricing perspective, but it's certainly going to put just a general overall pressure on the industry. And they have a tremendous cash pile that they can use for both marketing purposes as well as to, frankly, wait out some smaller providers who, may not necessarily have that same gigantic pile of cash sitting on their balance sheet that SpaceX does.
Well, Gabe, the question at the end of the day here is, what's your plan as a broadband service provider? Are you going to keep lowering prices alongside companies like SpaceX? Again, they have
please don't
hundreds of billions of dollars to do this. They're already doing it. You don't have that. Again, and we're not like, this is real talk now. You don't have the ability to compete with SpaceX when it comes to lowering the price, and you shouldn't do that anyway. Gabe, I do love your footnote here. Do not make this a finance segment. not that.
I mean, you know me, right? I want to talk about the financials. So, but I'm like, no, we're not going to do it.
We're focused on ARPU right now. And I think the reality, Gabe, is this is a business that's going to be focusing on, can I call it RPAC? RPAC? Average revenue per account. ARPA? Account. Because what we've seen now from this earnings call, and this has been rumored for years now, months, is that Starlink is going to launch a cellular network of sorts. They're going to figure this out. They're going to launch a mobile product and service. They have explicitly stated they will be doing this. They're hiring roles to do this. Gabe, I think this is the next biggest threat. And mind you, this is just one part. This is just one piece of the puzzle. We've talked about Amazon Leo in the past. It's going to be even more interesting because I think with Starlink as a business today, they're offering broadband service. Tomorrow, maybe it's broadband and cellular. Okay, well, what else are they going to evolve into? Like, where is this going for them? Whereas with Amazon, we talked more about the Amazon ecosystem with Prime, video, delivery. We've talked about what Amazon can do, and it's going to get very interesting how these two compete versus us as broadband service providers with fiber, how we compete. And it's not going to be easy, Gabe.
Yeah, agreed. And this is where, to go back to this conversation about buying the business, Starlink, SpaceX, they can afford to buy the business right now. And that doesn't mean that every market has to be profitable for them at this point either. They can look at this longer term and think about, that consumer acquisition strategy and the fact that it can be subsidized by a platform. This is something that all of, I don't know. I don't want to get into Elon is such a genius and, freaking love that guy, right? Like, I definitely don't want to get into that conversation. So regardless of what you think about him one way or the other, very savvy business person, clearly, who has thought a lot about how different parts of his businesses can help create this platform across the entire portfolio of businesses that he has. Zach, I think you were telling me earlier that they were talking about potentially even putting basically mini cell towers in the charging stations for Teslas. So it's like one business helping kind of supplement the other and create this flywheel approach effectively of additional profit.
What you just described, Gabe, is innovation. And when I think of innovation, I think of what problems do we need to be solving? What problems should we solve? And we just walked through, several, remote broadband service. I think that's where Starlink started. If you're out in the middle of the mountains of Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, great, you can be connected now. A fiber provider is not coming to you. Whereas
Hmm.
now, Starlink has expanded well beyond that. They're planning to use those nodes as cellular, I don't want to call them towers, hotspots here in the future as well. More to come on that. And then they're continuing to expand problems. We've seen their partnerships with cellular providers to date, being able
Hmm.
to use the AllTrails app, texting, and these different functionalities, these different features from your phone wherever you may be. And I've always described that as that's Starlink's intro into your household. I told you when I put Starlink in my car to, satisfy some of these dead zones that I constantly battle, they have an entry point into my house. I had to move away. Gabe, I haven't told you this story yet. I had to move away from my fiber provider because I moved into a new place, back to big cable, and there's an outage every day. Last Friday there was
Really?
3 outages,
Wow.
and it got to a point where I said, I am going to take my Starlink dish and I'm going to put it on my patio and I'm just going to see how it uses for a day. My GeForce gaming that I talked about in a previous episode, that cloud gaming, it's almost unusable now without that fiber, but I'm going to see what it would be like from satellite. And it may be worse. It might actually be. But you can, Gabe, when I talk to you next on Monday or whenever that may be, I'll tell you the results of this test. And I'm pretty sure I know the answer. And
Mm.
it again, this is more of that problem that we're seeing is that good enough broadband. I'm very
Hmm.
frustrated with my provider after just a month. And I wouldn't say I'm looking for alternatives, because I already have one in my car. I predicted this, 2-3 months ago. Gabe, they said they have a
You did
foot
say this.
into my
Absolutely.
house, and this is not, some like long 3 month story I'm trying to tell. This is just the natural progression here.
Mm.
Um, Back on
Well,
the topic though.
before you move off of that topic, that's exactly why it is that slow risk of erosion.
Mhm.
It's not the immediate risk. We know that fiber technology is better, but
100%. I would take
it's
fiber
that
over anything today if I could.
absolutely right. I think any normal person would, but it's that slow erosion that happens. It's that you started down this relationship with them. You're starting to have this ongoing relationship with Starlink, and then that slow erosion happens over time. And then when you add that mobile wedge into it as well, where all of a sudden, if you had Starlink Mobile as an example, as your mobile provider, well, now all of a sudden, well, why doesn't it make sense for me to just try and bundle these things together? This also gets to the ARPU piece and the ARPA piece that you mentioned as well, the average revenue per account. Many fiber providers need that strong ARPU to subsidize the massive investments that it's taken in order to build the network and
Mhm.
invest in the network. They don't have that same ability to cross subsidize that a SpaceX or a Starlink will have. Starlink can experiment with price. They can experiment with different hardware. They can experiment with bundles.
And they
They can
do.
experiment with mobile, and they're absolutely doing that. And they can do that in a way that a local provider, frankly, can't match. And that's the part that I think is just frankly a little bit concerning.
Gabe, you're traveling today, and I didn't send you this tweet, but like I said, this is news that transpires daily, which is why Gabe and I keep talking about it. But even Elon tweeted today, he said something along the lines of, people will choose their flights based on Starlink. Gabe,
Hmm.
I have been telling you that I do that all summer long. Back to every flight I booked this year, the first thing I look at is amenities on United, Starlink, yes, no. And I'm doing a pretty good job at it right now, but again,
Well,
it's
it's funny because you texted me and I was like, oh, I was just about to send you a message on Slack, but the Wi-Fi on this plane, took a dump and I wasn't able to send it. So, it's definitely something I suffered through this morning while trying to work on the plane with Wi-Fi that was incredibly spotty because it was not Starlink. And as I've said, the experience with that on airplanes especially is incredibly good and will have a positive halo effect for that company. There is no doubt in my mind.
absolutely, it's innovation. And by the way, I made this comment earlier. I said everything we talked about, whether or not you like Elon or not, we're not going to get into that. The companies SpaceX does it. These are innovative companies. What have you as a broadband service provider innovated on in the past 20 years? Don't say fiber. Beyond fiber, what have you innovated on? That would be a question I would be interested in hearing the answer to. Um, Moving on
Can I
though.
ask another? Can I
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
one
go
other
ahead.
question before we move on to the
Or
next
I
topic?
should
So
say,
sort of in that
what
same lane.
innovation have you done and what problems have you solved? Because I mentioned
Mm,
the problems with remote connectivity, out hiking, exploring where there's no options. These are all problems that are being solved. So innovation and problems, I think that's a great place to start.
for sure. And then I think the other question to ask here is, what happens when you have a competitor that is not trying to maximize ARPU in the same way that you are?
Hmm.
And also, this is this is something that we talked about a long time ago. I can't, it's been like maybe years, Zach, which is crazy to say that we've even been doing this for years. But there are competitors that are right in front of you. They're the ones like the large cable providers or, another fiber provider that's overbuilding the same area that you are, maybe a fixed wireless provider that was in that area already. Those feel like the direct competitors, but it's sometimes the indirect competitors that are actually more of a threat because you're not paying attention to them as much, because you don't think that they're actually a problem. And then all of a sudden,
It's a
12 or
problem.
24 months goes by and it's a problem. And I really genuinely feel like we're in that phase right now where many, many, many providers are still not thinking about satellite as a threat and as a problem. I hear it come up in customer conversations all the time. Oh, that's not the same as fiber. Oh, they can't offer the same speeds. Oh, they can't offer the same level of service.
Yep.
I am 100% sure that there were a whole bunch of people who sat in large telephone companies 25 years ago and said the exact same thing about mobile providers.
Just today,
They
Gabe, I
can't
heard.
offer the same quality of service. Therefore, our customers won't switch.
Just today, Gabe, I heard from a customer that was saying, "quote Starlink is starting to become a problem," and all I could think of was like, "Who could have foreseen this?" But Gabe, I sent you a text today, and it was a screenshot from Reddit, and it's from 8 years ago. So that would be what 20? Is that 2018? Oh my gosh,
Uh,
Gabe,
yeah. Wow,
man,
man.
it's from 8 years ago, and it's titled "Why Starlink is Impossible." And I thought this was the funny. It's a whole article on how this will never work. It's never going to take off. And like one of the quotes too, Gabe, was nobody at SpaceX did the math. Where here we are 8 years later,
That was my favorite part of that whole thing.
8 years later, Gabe, and in the earnings call, 12 million subscribers as of last month. This is doubled from last year. A year ago, they had 6 million subscribers. And we just talked about the ARPU hit and how they're buying these subscribers. It's working for them. This is a
Hmm.
17% increase over Q1 even. Gabe. Like they're going out, they're acquiring these subscribers. It's working. They have
Hmm.
the velocity here. And to the point here, the broadband providers that might be dismissing there says something that's too expensive or technically limited. We've been talking about that, but do we believe that yet? And yes, there are technical limitations and those odd cases, to be aware of. But from a customer experience standpoint, Gabe, I'll be honest with you. I have never seen anyone complain about Starlink. I have never seen it. And you could tell me, prove me wrong, tell me wrong, but I've yet to see anyone complain about this product.
I haven't heard a lot of complaints, or really many complaints about it either. It seems to be a fairly positively reviewed product. I
Actually,
mean, there's always
I
going to
will
be.
say, every now and then there's a post on Reddit. This always cracks me up. But someone will like mount the dish like beneath like the soffit of their house and be like, why there obstruction? Then it's like your roof is over half the dish. So like that
uh,
always like that's pretty funny to me. But again,
that is hilarious.
again, that aside, I genuinely don't see many complaints. And again, I will say again, it's not a product for everyone. Gabe and I, we still know fiber's better technically, but does the average
Well, and
consumer know
there's
that?
obviously going to be, there's going to be concentrations of areas that never make sense for this, at all, right? But
Downtown San Francisco, probably not the best
yes,
place for
exactly.
Starlink. I haven't tried it, but
Probably
like
not going to make.
theoretically, it shouldn't be a good experience.
Correct. But, there's been this discussion for a long time now about it being a niche product. Well, at what subscriber growth number does it stop becoming niche? They're at 12 million subscribers now. I would argue that's getting out of niche product. It's not just something that is being used in these very, very, unique use cases. And this is the other part of it too, is, as more and more subscribers get signed up for this solution, that the word of mouth is going to grow as well. Just like you said, Zach, if people are talking about it as a positive solution, so as people are seeing it in airlines, as people are seeing it, as they're, using it for camping and, some of these other experiences, that social proof is just going to get louder and louder. And again, is going to, result in that flywheel moving even faster and faster.
Two things on that, Gabe. Number one, are you telling me there's not 12 million RVs that people are using Starlink from? People are actually using this in their homes?
Yeah, yes. Although I don't know, maybe there are 12 million RVs in the world. I don't know. And again, to be fair, right, 12 million subscribers across the globe. So, there's definitely, there's definitely situations outside of the US where Starlink is going to make a lot more sense than, an urban environment like San Francisco, as Zach was talking about earlier.
But the velocity, quite literally there. Last thing I'll say, though, Gabe, on that note is, we talked about flights and like the brand recognition. When you get on, I'm in the Denver market, so I'm a big United flyer. When you're walking down the jet bridge, before you get on a plane, what's the first thing you see on that plane? You see a blue sticker on the side that says, Starlink Wi-Fi. What's the first thing that you see when you sit down? Well, if you got the screen back displays, they have Starlink ads. They played Starlink ads before their safety videos on the last flight I took too. So like this brand recognition, this advertising is there. We saw the fiasco with, was it Delta said they were going to do Leo, and like the revolt that happened from that, which was quite bizarre to begin with. But the brand recognition's out there. They're getting a lot of, I don't want to say free advertising, but they're getting a lot of publicity.
I'm sure it's not free, but it is, you're right, it is getting out there. And you're right about that kind of non-skippable ad that happens before the safety video, which is hilarious. But the other one is when you actually connect to it, then there's another video that plays right before, basically before you're connected to the actual Wi-Fi. So it is that just continued brand recognition, this continued conversation that's happening with customers. And this, I guess, kind of leads us into the mobile piece of this, because this again is a huge part of this discussion.
Can I just add one last thing before we talk about mobile?
Oh, please. Yes.
We have to talk about this because I think it's such a great point, but oh man, growing up, the worst part was report card day at school, right? When you get your grades back, right? I was a good student in college.
I was going to say, were you a terrible student? I feel like you must have been a good student, Zach.
I knew what I was good at, and in college, I definitely excelled and had a significantly higher GPA. The biggest thing in college, Gabe, that got me is I got an A- one semester, and being on a plus minus scale, that A- does not count as a 4.0. So it ruined my GPA by a couple decimal points. Not to
Has anybody asked you what your GPA was though in college? Is this a conversation?
No, and this is why I bring it up, because report cards, no one likes report cards.
No.
But if you're evaluating, Starlink on tech specs versus fiber, right? Again, Gabe and I, we all know that satellite doesn't beat fiber on specs, but you're using the wrong report card to evaluate this to begin with. Again, it goes back to the good enough experience, right? The fact that I can get in my car and I don't want to say, gotta be careful how I say this. I'm not using my phone going down the road, but the fact that I can, upload content when I'm out and about, or I can, I do a lot of drone photography, videography for kind of side hustle too. The fact that I can share this content, keep connected, be able to use my phone when I need to, or whatever that situation may be when I'm not driving. That is the experience I'm talking about. I'm not running speed tests constantly. I'm not looking to see how many megabits per second I'm getting on Starlink. I know it works. It works exceptionally well when I'm out in the mountains, and that's all I need to know. By the way, drive up through the Tetons, drive up through Yellowstone. You'll be surprised at how many white dishes you see in the windshields of people's cars. It's quite impressive, Gabe. I can spot this thing a mile away now, but the experience, that connected experience of just being out and about is what I'm focused on. Do I know? Have I run speed tests? Yeah, I've run speed tests.
Well, that's because you're a weirdo that works in this industry, but you're not the typical consumer.
Yeah, but at the end of the day is, I've had friends and siblings connect to this when we're out and about. We're all connected. No one's running speed tests. They know it works. They're impressed. It's, I got to get this for my car. Anyway, that aside, we're talking about mobile now, because I just talked about phones and That's kind of the
Well, yeah,
primary reason I
you
got
set
this.
that up perfectly because you're talking about being out and about, connectivity on your phone, and this is just the perfect extension of that. So I
Yeah,
completely agree. We have to talk
and
about it.
I love this quote so much because you know me, Gabe, the capitalist. I just love like the savage like business, take
Uh,
over. The Starlink president, Gwen, uh, her exact quote was along the lines of looking at the big three providers we have today and saying they're making 600 billion combined. We can take part of that. That's up for grabs. They're being very clear again on what their intentions are in entering this space. Now, I will say it's still early. Starlink does not have a terrestrial network like these big three providers. If I walk into a mall or walk into a mall, when's the last time anyone's walked into a mall? When I walk into Crumble, I'm inside a building. Am I going to be connected to that satellite? Probably not. How are we going to fill that gap? These are questions that are being answered. But the fact that the president of this company is already coming out and saying, we are taking that back, it's super interesting. And the other interesting part around this is if you think about what we've seen in the industry in the past, Gabe, a lot of MVNOs out there, a lot of these mobile operators, using the network that one of the big three's already built. I don't think Starlink's going to enter in this space. I don't think any of the big three would want them to be entering in this space.
No, I think they'll actively work against them to enter into that type of space. So,
the big question I have here,
it requires them to be innovative to solve the problem then.
I was just going to say, as a customer of one of the big three, what are they going to do to keep me from churning? Because, again, going back, I solved a problem in my car. Maybe I'll be solving a problem in my house with outages or a secondary win, if anything. What are they going to do about my actual phone? Because they're halfway to me already, right? So what is the big three, carrier that I have right now doing to prevent that? And if you've watched any of their stocks this week, they all slid. Investors want to know the answer too. But if I was the CEO of any of these big three companies, I'd be a little nervous right now, Gabe, if I'm being honest.
100%. And it goes back.
I would be nervous.
I would be nervous as well, especially based on the quotes. And I'm just going to read some of this direct quote from, I think it's from the president that you mentioned earlier. I expect us to be able to acquire quite a few of their customers. I think our service will be better. We will eliminate dead zones, leveraging satellites in orbit. Exactly. I thought that part was very interesting. That we will eliminate dead zones, leveraging satellites in orbit. And I thought that was a very interesting way to frame it up. And, they're not just looking at the satellite to be the connectivity piece of it, but they're also looking at creative ways that we mentioned this earlier. How can they, leverage the Tesla network, the charging network that's already out there? How can they leverage the satellite dishes that are already out there as well? They're talking about potentially turning those in. And I don't know how this technology is going to work. These people are way smarter than I am, but leveraging the technology in the actual satellite dish to, I guess, make it basically a mini cell site. I mean, I guess is what they would be doing.
Oh, so man, my car driving down the highway game is going to be, everyone's going to be crowding around my hopefully Rivian by then.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting idea, and it speaks to that innovation again that they're looking to leverage and the way that they've been able to be creative and solve these problems. The creativity to just address these things in a very different way, I think it's one of their biggest advantages. And it's the I forget I'm as I said, I'm tired, so the quote is escaping me. But basically, because they don't have cell sites, they don't have the traditional network infrastructure, they're going to be forced to approach this in a different way. And I think in this case, it is going to be maybe a benefit for them in the long term because they're forced to do things very, very differently than they would in a traditional mindset.
So, Gabe, the last part of this puzzle here is Amazon. And we've talked enough about Starlink today. Let's talk about Amazon and what they're doing with Leo. I got to say, I think I like Kuiper better than Leo, Gabe. I don't know. That might just be the marketer in me, though. But the marketer
I tend to agree. Also, Leo is just, it's generic, isn't it?
Well, I think the marketer in me says they're going for the Google search keywords.
That probably is true. That's a
But
good point.
so, and I mentioned this in the financial segment, the non-financial segment, but I said something about how we're focused on ARPU, average revenue per user, but what's the average revenue per account? Because as you add these managed, products and services in, well, what's that revenue look like? And I think here, um, Amazon has an incentive to push quite heavily in this space. We've seen what Starlink has done, but again, I wish I could stop saying what's Amazon going to do. I wish I could just say this is what Amazon is doing, and we may know in a month or two, or by the end of the year, hopefully as well. But we have a competitor in this market that I think is going to be very dangerous to Starlink and to you as the fiber provider.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're dangerous to both. And certainly, Starlink has a first mover advantage. They've already got 12 million subscribers, all of that. But Amazon has a massive, massive set of data and relationships with hundreds of millions of households in the US, especially around Amazon Prime. And obviously they're offering that in other countries too. It's this ecosystem with Ring, with Alexa, with Eero, with all of the things that they have from an Amazon Prime perspective, streaming video, all of those sorts of things. I don't think anybody's going out on a limb here now saying that it's highly likely that Amazon is going to bundle some sort of Leo service into Prime. Maybe it won't be the most premium service, but it's highly, highly likely that they're going to do that.
There will
And
be a bundle.
Amazon well, yeah, and an Amazon mobile service has been talked about forever. That's been going back a few years that people have been talking about. Hey, is that something that Amazon is going to do? Are they going to bundle? Are they going to offer a $10 a month mobile service and just absolutely cut off the knees of the big three providers?
Hey, this goes back to Apple. This is something people wanted Apple to do, and Apple's always played the game of we don't want to kind of step on the feet of the big three or the big four going back to the day or however many they started with. But this is something that they've even talked about, or, and I'm not going to say Apple's going to join this, but like we're watching these other companies do this now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the question I would really encourage people to think about here is, if Starlink can make the industry overall nervous and uncomfortable with 12 million global subscribers, what happens when Amazon starts bundling connectivity into the customer relationships that they already have with over 100 million households, I believe, in the United States specifically, that have Amazon Prime.
And by the way, Gabe, what did the FCC, just greenlight with Amazon? Direct-to-device spectrum. So what could Amazon possibly want to do with that?
It seems like a very natural extension of everything that we just talked about with Starlink Mobile and being able to offer that mobile service as well. So, it's pretty clear to me that they're going to be coming for a huge portion of this too. And now you've got two other very legitimate competitors that are going to be coming after subscribers. And in the case of Amazon, with this really rich set of data that they have with subscribers already, and if there's an Eero Wi-Fi system in the home, even more so, if Starlink is the wake up call, right? Amazon Leo is you can't hit the snooze button on that. You can't afford to. It's just too much of a risk to completely ignore that. Again, even if we know that the technology is not as good.
Ring cameras with Starlink, with satellite, not Starlink.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the vision. So, Gabe, as we wrap up here, just kind of two last subjects here. Number one, what are people getting wrong, and what should you do differently here? And I think we've talked about this. Not to beat a dead stick with a horse here, but the wrong assumption number one, technical superiority. That does not mean market immunity. We've seen that. I have so many fiber providers that come back and say, "Hey, we're losing subscribers to Starlink." If we really lean into that technical superiority, that wouldn't be happening, right? And the mobile coverage here is going to change this criteria here again. Number two assumption here, Starlink is only relevant in unserved areas. I think we've very much talked about how that's just not the case anymore. We're seeing people. I see people on Reddit all the time in cities, Denver, Colorado, going out and getting Starlink. When I drive through my town, Gabe, I see people where I know they have fiber service with Starlink on their house. I don't understand that. I would love my fiber back compared to what I have now with big cable. But I think those are just two of the biggest assumptions we see here. Along with the churn will be obvious. I think even today I have providers that will say, "Oh, like we're starting to see this. It's been this kind of slow erosion that's building up,
Hmm.
and will it become a tsunami? Well, let's hopefully do something before we get to that point." And then the last one here,
Can we pause on that one really quick,
yeah,
just on the churn one? Because I was doing some research for an upcoming customer conversation, and I was looking at churn specifically, and it's interesting because if you look at the commentary from the large providers, the large cable providers, the large national providers, they're getting asked very specifically in their earnings calls, "Are you losing customers to Starlink?" And they're kind of doing the, well, not really. We're not hearing that in the customer conversations that we're having, except for in really rural areas. But the one thing that I will say there is that they're all of the large cable providers lost subscribers last quarter. Okay. Like hundreds of thousands of
yeah,
subscribers across the board.
where are they
And what's
going?
interesting is that even though they say, well, we're not losing people to these satellite providers, the other thing that they're struggling with right now is gross additions. They're not adding as many subscribers as they were in the past as well. Some of that is certainly due to fiber overbuilders. There is no doubt about that, where, fiber overbuilders have come into these markets and they're getting those new subscribers. But I'm willing to bet that they are also losing some of those new subscribers to satellite services or to Starlink specifically, since that's the only one that's really legitimate at this point. So I again, while they're saying, yeah, we're not really losing people to these satellite providers right now, I do think the challenges that they're having with adding subscribers has to do with this also.
Yeah. And just last two things here as we wrap up, Gabe. I keep talking about this. I talked about it last week too with Kristen and Christina. Local autonomy doesn't already win. It doesn't always win. It's not an automatic victory for you. You only win in this case if the experience is meaningfully better. You can't just say, "We are the local provider, you should choose us." It doesn't work. You have to actually show up, and really make that your promise statement. Your customer
Mhm.
experience needs to be focused and centered around this. Otherwise, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, it's nothing more than a fact. Um,
I loved that quote from last week. You said that, and I totally caught it as I was driving along the freeway. You said, local is just a fact, and I was like, oh man, that like totally stopped me in my tracks listening to the episode. It was a really good one.
yeah, I mean, like look up the definition of local in a dictionary and like let's build off that. But the last thing here, the last assumption here, and I'm sure someone listening to this podcast has thought about this, but mobile is a separate product, right? That's a separate product from broadband. It's all about that relationship though, Gabe. We've talked about
Mhm.
my own relationship with these providers and how that's changed and how that's evolved. It's a connectivity decision. It's not just a home internet decision. I very clearly said, 3 months ago, I put this in my car. Suddenly I'm talking about using it as my primary connection at my house now that I lost my local fiber provider. And then, when this mobile product comes out, what's next then? Um, it's 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 going to be very interesting. But Gabe, we can't just be, gloomy here and talk about the doom here
We
because
do try
everything we
and bring it
talked
around and
about
be
today,
positive.
yeah, everything we talked about today, you can do something about. And that's what we want you to do. We don't want you to sit around and wait for this to be a problem. If you're seeing it as a problem today, we want you to do something about it here. So I think we have
And
to
let
talk
me
about,
add something before we move off of that, Zach.
yeah.
Even if you are not seeing it as a problem today, we still want you to be doing something about it. We want you to get out in front of this because we genuinely believe this is going to be a problem. Even if you're not in the situation where you're losing customers to these providers right now, we think there is a massive risk that that could happen in the future. And the work that you're doing right now is going to set you up for that success in the future.
I mean, I think that's I think that's a great place to close, Gabe. I think we've talked a lot about satellite this year. We've talked about the different types, the different companies doing this. We've talked about the implications, and now we're talking more about you know uh, the innovation, the creativity that I mentioned. The what's happening next? Where is this going to go? How do we compete with this? This is a playbook that needs to be followed here
Hmm.
because, like I said, Amazon's going to be trouble for Starlink, which is already trouble for, your fiber provider. So where does this go next? It's a big question mark right now. I cannot wait to do the episode where we can say this is Amazon's offer strategy.
I know,
Let's
I'm so
do something
curious.
about this. This is not good. And let's solve that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say if there are just a couple of things for people to take away from the conversation today and things that they can do to set themselves up for success, in that longer term, even if they're not seeing that threat right now, two things I would highly, highly, highly recommend. The first is you have got to be transparent with your pricing on your website. I still see way too many situations, Zach, where people are gating pricing between an address check or a zip code check.
I saw one where it's gated behind a contact us form today. I still don't know how much their services cost.
It's brutal. I saw one of those a couple of weeks ago as well, where you had to fill out a whole bunch of information to even see that. If you are still doing that, you've got to stop doing that right now. And you've got to, even if it's a range of prices on your website, that is fine. If you have different pricing in competitive versus non-competitive environments, okay, I'm okay with that. Put a range, for goodness sake. You have to start being transparent, because not only are AI search engines going to punish you heavily, but customers and potential customers are going to punish you heavily. And following in the same thing, you have to make the buy flow brutally easy. If somebody can buy Starlink, and Zach, I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but if somebody can buy Starlink with 2 clicks of their phone, or somebody is going to be able to buy Amazon Leo in the future by just plugging it directly into their Prime membership, if your purchase process is not comparable to that, and it is difficult to purchase, that will be a decision why somebody chooses to go with one of those other solutions.
And the example I always use there, and I feel like I say this once a week, is like, does this person not use the internet? But if you go to a website and it's painful to use, you don't know how to buy services, or it's just difficult, outdated, whatever that may be, you probably notice this right off the bat. It's very easy to see on other people's website. What does your own website look like? Gabe, in the past, I said, go to your own website, buy your own service, see what that experience is like, take very detailed
Staple yourself
notes.
to the order.
And then, yeah, exactly. And then go to Starlink's website and buy service, or, don't actually have to buy it, but see how many steps that takes, see what that experience is like. And one last thing I want to close off on, if anyone's still listening, is I saw a provider this week, 2 weeks ago now, mentioned that self-install was a con. They did a whole Facebook post about how self-install is not good. And all I could think of was, oh my gosh, number one, I've never had a scenario where self-install wasn't an option. But number two is, there's a difference between, professional install and self-install. But to list self-install as a con, when that is something that is going exceptionally well for the 12 plus million Starlink subscribers who've never had, I guess there are professional install options now. I'd be curious to know how many choose that. But
I'd be very curious about that too.
Maybe Dave, you should call into the next earnings call and ask that question. You'd be a good analyst.
This is Gabe Peterson from Gabe Peterson and Associates asking with a question.
Yeah. Well, you could. What's the old Seinfeld one where it's like him and the dad, his son? Where it's like Costanza and son. You could be Peterson and son.
Maybe I'll get Ethan to ask the question.
That's great. Well, Gabe, I want to make sure you have some time to rest this afternoon. So you go do that. We'll be back next week with another episode. And thank you everyone for tuning into Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.